This is John Drabinski, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a Mellon Grant-sponsored series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, doctoral students, and everyone in between, cultural workers, and political organizers in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. Today's conversation is with Taelore Marsh, Irma McClaurin Black Feminist Archives Archivist to the Robert S. Cox Special Collections and University Archives Research Center at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. In this conversation, we discuss the significance of archival construction, Black feminist methodologies for that construction, and how a commitment to the whole person changes the memory and history structure of an archive. Good afternoon, Taelore. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy we found this time. We've had some email and scheduling funkiness here and there, but finally, we're both here at the same time. I've been really excited to get you on the podcast to hear about the kind of work you're doing, how you think about it in relation to Black life, Black history, Black memory. Also, we're not at the same time. You're in the Pioneer Valley, having spent there many years there. I know you're working at UMass. So all of these things come together. I just think the work you're doing is incredibly important, and it's a really important voice and perspective to have on this podcast. So thank you for your time, and thank you in advance for your thoughtfulness.
No, thank you for having me. Like I told you, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm thankful for the position that I'm in right now because I know what I'm doing within the field of archival studies is something that is just substantial, and it's going to just completely change the game. And I'm just here to get the wheels turning on that, and
I love
the
that.
switch. Yes.
I love that. I mean, that's exactly the ambition we need in all things connected to Black studies, about changing fields and changing and shifting perspectives. So we'll hear a little bit about how you think about archival practice and study and all of these sorts of things. But I thought I'd start with a more personal question and ask you, what drew your interest, which is, of course, now that of an archivist. What drew your interest in Black life? What sort of formative experiences, whether they're childhood, educational, communal, political sorts of experiences, brought the sort of art of archival work and Black life together for you?
Well, for starters, I come from a family of educators, property owners, and business owners. So my people are deeply invested in community building and legacy. And I'm far from a first generation college student. My mom owns her own medical practice, and I was raised with a clear understanding of service, responsibility, and power. So I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is actually quite poignant for me to say that right now, as we know that the government is actively trying to dismantle the Woolworth sit-in exhibit at the African American Smithsonian Museum, as well as there is the Woolworths Museum in Greensboro, and I'm actually quite interested to see how that's going to play out as well. So history in the regard of just African American history, that's just something that's just been my everyday life surrounding. In fact, my grandfather was the Winston-Salem's NAACP president for well over 5 years. He recently just stepped down from that this past year. So I've always been raised around activists, how to be an activist, how to put your feet and there's a big part about activism in Black life is we have to understand we aren't all the foot soldiers. Some of us are the planners. Some are the people that are get out there and doers. Some of us are the speakers. And so that's something that I had to grow and learn. And that's actually what got me into the field of history, which is something I actually just kind of fell into because when I went to college, I just said, I'm going to go get a history degree. I had no thought process on how that's going to turn out to be. I just did something that I knew I enjoyed. And I think within Black studies, Black life, anything of this regard, you don't go into that with capital interests involved. Okay. These are passion projects. I stand on that. A big part of me doing what I do is because I enjoy doing it, and the passion that I have behind it is not backed behind financial gains, okay? Anybody that's working within the social sciences, arts and humanities, these are passion projects. And so That's where that part comes into play. But I have 2 history degrees, and what I really fell into was archives. That was a hard pivot. I went to school, I thought I wanted to be a history instructor. However, I had got an internship at Duke, at the John Hope Franklin Research Center on African and African American history and culture. And doing that, I got a processing internship doing that. And that's when I realized, I'm like, oh, now this is something I can do. When you first graduate from school, or when you're in school, or just figuring out life for the longest time, you can say, oh, I can tell you what I don't want to do. But that was the first time I did something. I was like, no, this is what I wanted to do. And so that experience right there really just like helped further my understanding of just like the Black experience within the field of history, because the archives that I've worked in have looked at African and African American history, and how do we highlight those who are considered the other outside of the normative historical narrative.
Mm. hmm So it's funny that you said that you fell into history, because as you were talking about, your family of educators and like local organizers, activists, actually sounded like exactly the kind of person who ends up in history. But I mean, our own experience of coming to something is different. But that's amazing. The internship at the John Hope Franklin Center. I mean, that's also just an incredible bit of I mean, luck's not the right word, but it's an amazing place to end up in terms of cultivating these kinds of interests. It's always full of the most interesting people. I mean, did working there as an intern, how did that shift sort of the way you thought about engaging with history?
So, when I was there, I worked on the Behind the Veil collection, which is the largest collection on oral histories on Jim Crow South, on
Hmm.
segregation in the Jim Crow South. It recorded individuals who lived through Jim Crow segregation in North Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, all of these places, Florida. It went through and interviewed thousands of people and their experience. These interviews were conducted in the 90s. These people, some were born in the late 1800s, okay? So these people really experienced that. When I was doing that, I was also working on my master's in history. And the reason why I applied for the job, because it was like processing archivist, looking at African American history, basically. I'm like, okay, I can do that. And so when I was there and I was working, of course, I'm in school, I'm writing my thesis. Of course, I'm going to archives, like I'm doing my research, I'm there. But then being the person that was there that had to get the information out there or put it together so that researchers would come and interrogate this history, it really changed my perspective, because these are the stories that aren't there. Like, these are the stories that are like known to the community, to Black people. I really appreciated the work, the labor of love that went into recording these oral histories and putting them out there. This project has been going on, like they completed the last bit of oral histories, I think, in the early 2000s, but the collection was still being processed in I got this job, 2021, I think. So it's a labor of love, and it really shaped my mind, or my how I thought about things, because when you do oral history and you donate the stuff to an archive, people sign deeds of agreement, okay? And then just doing with oral histories, you're gonna sign a you sign, what's the word? Just I can't think of the appropriate term, but you just sign a document or a contract saying, I'm okay with X, Y, and Z, and then you put the restrictions that you that you want. So when these oral histories were conducted in the 90s, the internet did not exist in the way that it does today. So if these restrictions were yeah, you can keep this, but you can't have this. This can't be played in the state of Georgia, okay? Or this can't be housed in my hometown. When you go back and try to put this information out there with people who were in their 70s and the 90s, and then you have to
Mm-hmm.
go talk to their family and they're still afraid of retroactive consequences for them speaking on these things. It really helped me shape the narrative of what I want to get out there, because these people did not expect something that they said in 1990 to be accessible to the entire world. Like, this is on the internet for anybody to go look up and listen to today. And so that really, that radicalized me almost, I would say, just how something that I would say for Black people, we just kind of take for granted. Because, like I said, these are known knowns. Like, my grandmother, they'll tell you, if my grandmother told me a story, yes, my family knows that, and maybe that might be like hometown lore or whatever the case may be, but the expansion of the dissemination of information and its magnitude, it just really revolutionized how can I change the story. Not how can I change the story, but how can I get the whole story out there? Because these are
Mm-hmm.
still, they're answering questions about things that people are right now are trying to negate. The things that, oh, that didn't happen. Well, in fact, it did. Well, if you go to, I don't know, random name, Betty Jenkins interview from Halifax, North Carolina. If you go to in the interview 3 minutes and 30 seconds, she says that X, Y, and Z actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then she pulled out a picture from her scrapbook that she's had all this time. And she says, here's the proof. Now, I might be the only one with this picture at this point, but I'm not the only one that knows this story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. We'll obviously talk much more about archival practice, but that's that testimony to its power to demonstrate and also allocate, as you were saying, sort of allocate truth on its own terms and on the terms of the truth teller. I love that. Let me, I don't know if it's back up, but sort of shift a little bit and ask you about archival practice and the role of study in it. I think, I'll probably say this again, but I think a popular, sort of common idea of what archivists and archival practice is about just collecting materials and putting them in numbered folders and documents in sequence. But obviously, as you put together an archive, there are principles, there are ideas, there are values. So framing that in terms of study, so what is the role of study in all of this?
So study is central to the praxis. It's not passive. It's radical. It's intentional, and it's grounded. And mine is grounded in Black feminist praxis. As the inaugural Irma McClaurin Black feminist archivist, my job, my task is to change archival standards to be conscious rather than reactive. Within the field right now, we're going through this big thing of basically reparative work, going and fixing things that's been wrong, okay? And that's terms, subject terms, what you should say, how you describe people, all these different things. And so by grounding my work in Black feminist praxis and using conscious processing, that's where the study comes in. As someone who has, I'm an archivist and I'm a historian, so my theoretical framework overlaps in various ways. A framework that I utilize and I would like more people to utilize is this thing called a cedar cycle. A cedar cycle, which I first came across it in an article by Diana Thompson Dorsey and Tara Vincent Chambers. The cedar, which is CDR, which is interest convergence, interest divergence, and reclamation of power, to understanding shifts in historical power. So both Thompson Dorsey and Vincent Chambers describe our current moment as one where whites seek to reclaim and reassert power and privilege that was assuaged or enmeshed during previous periods of interest convergence. We know, and most people understand interest convergence by Derek Bell's concept of interest convergence, which argues that Black people achieve civil rights victories only when it advances or serves the interests of white people. And the idea of progress for Black communities are tolerated or promoted when it aligns with white political, economic, and social interests. Well, then if you take it a step further, you look at the interest divergence, and that's a concept that I like to look at, and I kind of looked at it through Lonnie Gounier's concept, which expanded on Bell's idea by highlighting how reforms that initially align with white interests often diverge once the benefits begin to shift power meaningfully to marginalized communities. What is the most important thing about this cycle and what we are witnessing right now is imperialistic reclamation of power. And that's where white people seek to reclaim and reassert power and privileges, like I said before, that were enmeshed during periods of interest convergence. And so that's when the dominant group aggressively uses legal systems to reassert control over public memory and education, which is what we are experiencing right now.
Yep.
I wish so many more people like we're implementing this thought process, but when it comes
absolutely.
to
It's sort of
like
frightening how you're outlining this thing. I'm like, you mean what's happening every day?
yes. That's unfortunately, I don't know if I'm clairvoyant or I just a historian. I don't know. And I'm gonna go with I'm clairvoyant, and this is just a good guess. That makes me feel a lot better. But when you look at it like that, so and when you combine Black feminist praxis, when you combine the Cedar cycle, it becomes very personal to me. But I think it really opens archival standards. It forces. We already have ethical standards that we have to use. You use the Bill of Rights already from the ALA. Don't censor people. Freedom of speech. All of these different things. Like you want to do that, but when we look at it in this regard, it really is a full circle moment. And this then goes back to me being from Greensboro, North Carolina, and them removing the Woolworth's lunch counter exhibit from the Smithsonian's. It like this is exactly what's happening. Like there's an erasure happening in real time. So study becomes resistance, if anything. It's how I stay grounded and how I push forward with ethical, community-driven archival praxis.
So maybe you've already answered this next question a bit, but I'll go ahead and ask it. I mean, you've definitely spoken to real content around this question in a really deep way, and I really appreciate that. I mean, the complexity of study that you articulated there. Thank you for that. I'm think about that for a long time. But I want to, what is your current work as an archivist say about Black life? And what I mean by that is, what do you think it's trying to establish, what it's trying to make in the world, what it's trying to argue for? Because again, it's archival work, as you made clear, is not simply a collection and categorization of materials, right? It's actually making a statement, right? It's making a claim. And so what is that? What is your work trying to establish, argue for, make in the world about Black life?
So, the founder of the Irma McClaurin Black Feminist Archive, Dr. Irma McClaurin, love her so much. She wanted to implement the whole life of the person, of the donor.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of, let me back up. The BFA, we center our collection development on those, because I don't want to limit myself to just women. I don't want to limit it to just Black women. Those individuals who utilize Black feminism, whether it is in activists, artists, intellectuals, researchers, musicians, whatever the case may be, we utilize that to add to the story, to make it a more fuller story. We're taking history from the bottom up, and we're just We're starting at the bottom, okay? It's just history at this point. But the thing also that we are implementing using Black feminist praxis is the whole life. When you think of those individuals that are in the archive, you think of people that are scholars. You think of intellectuals. That's still somebody's mom. That's still somebody's
Mm-hmm.
dad. That's
Mm-hmm.
still a football coach. They still cook every day. These are still regular, everyday people. So I'm including the whole life, not just the struggle and not just resistance, because as a Black, I'm so sick of that as a Black person. Like, oh, we have to fight. Everything is. I have joy. Okay. I have love. I am a creative. I am complex. Like, my work affirms that the Black experience is a very complex and nuanced experience. It is not a monolith. And so we're not just preserving documents. We're just, like I said, centering the lived experiences in their full dimensions. We argue for self-definition and visibility, resisting cycles of power reclamation described in the Cedar cycle. And as archivists, we are creating spaces for legacy, for healing, and for truth telling, like for real memory work. Dr. Irma, she has a poem that she likes to give out to our donors when people want to feel like, hey, maybe you want to give your materials. It's called "Getting Back All My Stuff: What to Do with It." I don't just want that's the name of the poem. I don't just want your research. That's nice, thank you, but Dr. Irma, that's the best example I can give right now. Dr. Irma, she's lived so many different lives. She calls herself the proverbial fly on the wall. She has amazing photographs of just people, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, and this is just by her just being there taking pictures and snapshots. Dr. Irma is a poet, okay? Dr. Irma is an anthropologist. Dr. Irma is a self-proclaimed archivist. Like, Dr. Irma, if I only looked at Dr. Irma, the anthropologist, on Belizean women history, that doesn't tell her whole life. That doesn't tell that Dr. Irma loves to cook or that she was a gourmet chef. I found that out myself. Like, we center the whole life. I believe we are protecting them now intentionally so they can't be erased again. Like, if I just tell the whole story as it is, I don't have to clean it up in the back end.
I mean, that's I love that this idea of archival practice being committed to and establishing this presence of a whole person. I really love that, and that idea of complexity is, that Black practice, right, is not simply a form of protest, but also about all these other things. I mean, that's, in terms of the African American intellectual tradition, it's one of its like great debates, especially around James Baldwin and Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, but Zora Neale Hurston. But it's an ongoing question because as you just laid it out, I think the default mode would be like, who is she as an anthropologist, or who is she as a political actor and a social actor in academia or elsewhere? So I love that sense of commitment. That was really just really well put, and is maybe an answer to this next question, which was, how do you see this practice? It's an answer. It's a maybe preparation for this next question. How you see your practice in relation to the history and future of Black intellectual and cultural life in the United States and or across the diaspora. And I ask that because archival work is absolutely central to intellectual and cultural life, always has been. And so I'm interested in how you see it in relation to that history. Where does it fit, your practice fit, but also the future? What boundaries is it pushing? What new horizons is it opening up?
Well, I feel like before I hit on that, I feel like the boundaries that it's opening up has caused me to have deeply personal self-reflection on my own bias and respectability politics within archival work. So as I stated before, the Black experience is not a monolith. Everybody experiences very different. However, as someone that is trying to bring to light the whole experience of Black feminists, something that I had to really check my own bias, and it was actually a very rude awakening. I Because there is like when the saying, when one of us looks bad, it makes all of us look bad. As I have tried to highlight these people, I almost in turn started erasing history. And that was based on, I want us to reflect in the most positive light possible. Um I almost was committed to correcting and silencing certain parts of the Black experience that I just didn't think portrayed us in the way that I wanted us to be seen. And like I said, it was a truthfully profound revelation in that. But it also helped me realize that archives as a space, and this is the part that the field of archival studies just has to really work on, and this is where the reparative work comes in. I had to be just straight up and down objective with what was there. Whether or not it looked good on the surface, I had to be objective in what was there. And it was not for me to interpret or make analysis of that. And as I have my grad students and I try to teach them how to process materials and do all these things, as researchers themselves, they want to analyze what's there. And I said, your interpretation may not be wrong. In fact, it probably is right. However, you can't take that away from the researcher who wants to come interrogate this information in the future. Like, I don't want to discredit any of my students' thought process about how they're going about it, because what they said, I agree with. If I look at the material, and the next researcher themselves might agree with it, but that is the problem with archives already. The story is being told through the master's narrative. And I had to really check myself on that. So, on what does it mean to the history and future, I say it's restorative and visionary. The Black intellectual life has always existed, often despite systematic erasure. And my practice is about repairing those gaps while also creating new futures. Repairing those gaps is checking myself. Okay, it's checking myself. I am not above having bias. I'm not above being prejudiced. I'm not above any of those things. So we have to address that. And across the diaspora, Black people have built intellectual traditions, often outside of formal institutions. My work ensures those traditions are documented, valued, used to shape new knowledge, which is what the Behind the Veil collection does. It's outside of the formal institution. However, when donors give their materials, items to an archive, and especially because I work at an academic library, now it's within the formal institution. However, within that institution, there's agency still must be given to the story, the whole life. So those traditions that are documented, valued, used, and shape new knowledge. Archiving is not just about preservation, as we talked about before. It's not about putting stuff in a folder, numbering it, and putting it out there on the internet for the people to use. It's transformative memory and expanding access to our collective brilliance. And collective brilliance falls outside of intellectual work, research, activism. Collective brilliance is the passing down of recipes. Collective brilliance is the laying of hands. It's praying. It's fellowship. That's the collective brilliance. And that's what I want to bring to the future of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you said the word brilliance, I mean, brilliance is for me such a, I'm going to start using that word. I will refer to this. Let's start using that word more because I think brilliance is, it's easily defined as something that radiates from a single source. But of course, real brilliance has, even like a light bulb has like a rounded where you're both moving our hands, but it has a large surface, right, with
Yeah.
edges and centers and off centers, and that sense of what it means to document the brilliance of the Black intellectual tradition, as you said, is as much about a recipe as it is an essay.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out, to your previous comment about principles that guide this practice of archiving, documenting, and presenting a full person really captures that. Not captures, it brings both of these things together. I love the way that word brilliance allows us to see like the many things that make a light. I love that. Yeah. Let me ask what you think, and probably you've already given a good bit of answer to this, but what do you think that Black archival work or archival work around Black materials, what do you think it's done well historically, but also what do you think it hasn't done well historically?
Okay, well, it's preserved resistance, activism, protest, survival. We have survival receipts. That's what we done well. Receipts that we still hear. What has not always been preserved is joy, the personal life, mundane moments, just the monotony, the minutia. We often prioritize political in the public and the exceptional. But Black feminism tells us that we got to go beyond. We have to go beyond this. We got to go to the memories, cultural rituals that it's just as revolutionary as my master's thesis that ain't nobody read, okay? Like, but that's the thing. Like, people would assume that the intellectual work that I do outweighs just me as the person, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. You asked me, how would I like to be addressed? I'm Taelore. I'm just Taelore. I'm not. I don't call myself Taelore the Archivist. I'm not Taelore the historian. I'm Taelore. I'm LaToya's daughter. That's who I am. I'm just Taelore. Like, I'm Taelore from Greensboro. That's just me. That's the problem. That to me is the problem. We gotta document, and I am pushing the whole life. Like, that's the shortcomings. I'm sick of survival receipts. That's what we got. When Black people, when you see them in the archive, they're survival receipts. You did it. You there. Something bad happened, and you overcame it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. just straight up and down. I don't like that.
This is where, I've been thinking a lot lately, and it's been in a number of podcasts that just would highlight in terms of inside the podcast, the two podcasts that my collaborator Ashley did, one with Martha Jones and another with Blair Kelly, who had really reflected really deeply on the practice of writing history and writing personal history, like how these two things come together, not as a compromise of a sort of an objective history, or not as a flattening of a very personal, emotional history, but as this richer, fuller picture. And I just think when we, the role of biography in the Black intellectual tradition, African American intellectual tradition, I'll just say, I do think so many biographies are about trying to trace out relationships that people had around literary relationships or political relationships, but the complexity of things that people struggle with, that's a harder thing to find its way even into a biography.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does find its way into a biography, it often gets such a visceral reaction. I think about Manning Marable's biography of Malcolm X, and he he discussed in some detail, Malcolm X's early life as a sex worker. And that was the only thing that people cared about, that this was scandalous and against the political sort of meaning of his life. But it made me wonder along the lines of what you were saying. It's like, what does it mean to take these whole people seriously, even in a biography, which is supposed to be that?
Mm-hmm.
But the survival or accomplishment or resistance receipts, as you put it, they dominate so much of the imagination of what an important life is, or what is important about a life. That's why I like when you say I'm just Taylor. I mean, I do. I just always like, I'm just John, and that's the most common name you have. And I like that because a professor or archivist or author, you become unrecognizable to your intimates, and maybe
hmm
those are actually some people's memories that matter to understanding everything that's happening.
I think I want to double down on that. I think if we effectively tell the whole life, we can fix cancel culture. I think if you telling people what it is from the start, from the finish, you can nothing can be pulled out the back end and be like, well, you ain't tell us that you did this. Well, I told you. What do you mean I didn't? I told you. Like, I think we if we just tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I can't stand a liar. I can't stand a
Same.
liar, and I feel like erasing history, you're lying. So let's stop that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always thought there's there's a particular power of archivists is to gather without restraint, right, and without selection. Um,
hmm
I mean, it's nothing the same, so please don't misunderstand me. But when I was a postdoc, I actually did the blandest archival work, which was just stamping the sequential numbers on these pages of this philosopher, and came across personal stuff that was unbelievable and was
hmm
like completely, scandalous is the wrong word because it was really deeply existentially awful.
hmm
And the person who was overseeing it, who was one of the students, was like, "You got to throw that stuff away." And it was that first moment where I was like, well, archivists are up against something, but, in terms of, respectability, in terms of
hmm
objective pictures about, in this case, it was definitely like an emigre from Germany and sort of the importance of his life of having escaped National Socialism. And so, but I like the contemporary resonance of it when you said, one way to defeat cancel culture is that the whole truth was told at the beginning.
Yeah, and like I told you, like and when you saying the student having to saying telling you to throw it away, now I'm like, now what did that donor agreement say? Because that ain't how none of this works. That person should not that right there. We're hitting on so many things that are like just the issue within the field of archives. Like who is that to say that you can erase that part of that person?
Yeah, it's a pretty bold statement.
Egregious.
Yeah, and I think part of what you've tapped into multiple times as well is how serious this question is when it comes to the question of archiving Black life, where the overwhelming narrative of from slavery to freedom, just to use John Hope Frank,
I was about to say, Dr. John Hope.
but that from slavery to freedom narrative is, I mean, it's immensely important. I'm not trying to say it's not immensely important. It's defining narrative of our country in some ways, but that's such there's so much pressure on that narrative, so much weight to it that I can see how it makes archival work difficult when it goes against that. But also, I mean, do you think? I mean, this is sort of off the cuff question, but do you think there's a generational shift around archival practice around this, or do you think archivists have always been committed to it?
I will say reparative work has been going on for a while now, and I don't think it's a generational shift. It's called an entrance convergence. That's what happened. It was an interest convergence. They had to start fixing things that's out there for the public to see when we pushing these narratives that we're a country making change. If we're a country making change, why are we calling people names that they don't want to be called? And I'm not going to be the one to say the words that shouldn't be said because y'all ain't going to say that Taylor said that and she said, we know what certain groups of people don't want to be called, okay? We know what is outdated. We understand all of these things. This happened as a result of us, America, the country, wanting to keep seeming like this forward changing place. The real question that I'm going to have in the future, and it's not even a future question. It's a question that's on my mind right now. Interests are diverging. Okay, we're past that. We're like I talked about. We're in the reclamation of power. What dominant group within the field of library and information science gonna go back to saying, well, honestly, let's just go back to the way it was. And that could be somebody my age saying that, and I'm only 27. I don't think it's a generational thing. I don't. All of these things happened for very specific reasons. Nothing is by happenstance within this field. And as my supervisor says, there are no emergencies in archives. There is not one emergency in an archive. So if these things that can be kind of like, let's just like table this, let's table this, and let's table this. Eventually, if we table it long enough and we saying we're going to do all these different changes, because let's say the Library of Congress and they want to update their subject headings. What I'm doing right now is coming up with my own list of subject headings that are appropriate to contemporary norms. What subject terms do I want to use that are appropriate, that are not reflective of past troubles? So they're gonna keep tabling this stuff. Okay, reparative work been happening. Has the Library of Congress updated anything? Is the question. Individual archives are taking steps. What about the whole? What about the whole? This is not something that can just be done at one individual. I am one archivist at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I am one person trying to fix that with 4 grad students.
It's got to go. It has to be bigger. The Library of Congress. I mean, will Library of Congress exist in 4 years? But anyway.
Hey.
It's just down the street from me. Well, let me take as a final question, and maybe you've already given a few thoughts on this, but I'll ask it directly. What is the one issue or question you'd like to see collectors and critics asking?
Ooh, I thought long and hard about this one too. I love to see people asking, how are we resisting cycles of convergence, divergence, and imperialistic reclamation that seeks to erase Black memory? How are we helping Black communities intentionally archive their lives in their own terms? Okay? Because if we don't define what is valuable in our lives, others will. And as we've seen, they'll define it in ways that diminish and erase us. And my job is to help our communities reclaim all of our stuff, as Dr. Irma has so beautifully stated. But it's not just not the big moment, but all of it. So my questions are like, just how do we fix the erasure of Black memory? Like, that's the ultimate question. How do we fix the erasure of Black memory? And because this memory is trying to be erased, how do we teach the Black community how to maintain their memory? And that's my next task that I want to do. I want to teach communities about community archiving. That's, at this point, that's the only real answer I have. Is for me to give the tools that I have and give it and pass it down. Because my educational philosophy is, and this is something I came up with when I first started grad school, is to disseminate information to the masses in a way that is easily accessible to the lay person. Okay? And that's just as simple as saying, if you can't explain a big concept to a 5-year-old, you don't know what you're talking about. So that's what I got.
I have to say, this is a Black Studies podcast, and one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental imperative of Black Studies is that link to community memory and tradition. And the way this conversation has come back to that with such sharp focus in terms of your own practices, I really love that. It's a fantastic place for us to wrap up. So, Taelore, I was really excited for us to talk, and this has been, just so much better than I'd even anticipated. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for such thoughtful responses and challenges to us, really, in so many ways. I think everybody listening to this is going to be taking notes and thinking hard about how your own work as an archivist and the principles and values that are driving you, how they fit their own work, no matter what we are, right? High school teachers, college teachers, activists, artists. So thank you for all of this. It's been fantastic.
Thank you for giving me the space to ramble and yip and yap, because I love to talk.
Well, I mean, if we are conversational mode, so I appreciate you embracing that wholeheartedly. And it was absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.